Hello, and welcome to the second webinar in IUCN's Vital Sites series in the run-up to the World Conservation Congress. Today's webinar is focused on designing and managing protected and conserved areas to support inland water ecosystems and biodiversity. My name is Robin Abel, and I'll be the host of today's webinar. I work for the Nature Conservancy in the role of Durable Freshwater Protection Director. The Nature Conservancy is a co-host of today's webinar, along with IUCN's World Commission on Protected Areas, the IUCN Protected and Conserved Areas Team, WWF, the IUCN SSC Freshwater Conservation Committee, and Equilibrium Research. Our objective for this webinar is to raise your understanding of how protected and conserved area design, designation, and management can support the conservation of river, lake, and wetland biodiversity and associated social values. We'll do this in two ways. First, by providing a high-level overview of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas' first technical report focused on inland waters, published in conjunction with COP16 last year. And second, by showcasing real-world case studies where inland waters are being conserved. And for those of you who might be less familiar with the term, we're talking about inland waters in the sense of rivers, lakes, and all other inland wetlands. Here's what our webinar is going to look like today. First, we'll hear from Dr. Madhu Rao, who's going to set the stage for what follows. Next, we'll hear from two of the WCPA report's lead authors, Michelle Thiem and Tara Moberg, and they're going to walk us through some of the report's key messages. After the report overview, we'll transition to our case studies, each presented by someone who's been directly involved with them. Next slide, please. Following the case studies, we'll have time for what we expect will be a rich Q&A session. You can put your questions for any of the speakers, again, into the Q&A section of Zoom at any time, and we encourage you to upvote others' questions. With that overview, I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker, Dr. Madhu Rao. Madhu is the chair of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas, senior advisor of the Wildlife Conservation Society, and an adjunct associate professor at the National University of Singapore, with over 25 years of experience with designing and supporting the implementation of conservation field programs across Asia. Madhu, please join us.
Thank you, Robin, and a big hello to everyone. Very much, I'd like to welcome you all to this installment of the Vital Sites webinar series on the importance of area-based conservation measures to support inland water ecosystems and biodiversity. Freshwater habitats, including rivers, streams, lakes, and other wetlands, are among the most threatened ecosystems on our planet. Their biodiversity is declining far more rapidly than that of our oceans or forests and needs to be urgently put on a track to recovery. The protection and conservation of inland waters is important for three reasons, at least. First, these systems are closely intertwined with human livelihoods and well-being. Second, inland water and terrestrial areas interact in a matrixed landscape. Inland waters are also directly connected to coastal and marine systems. So as such, their effective conservation is critical to all three realms. Third, conservation of inland waters is complex. Given the highly connected nature of inland waters, we will need to look beyond individual protected or conserved areas to broader basin-wide approaches for effective and lasting results. It is very clear that rapid, scaled, and monitored investments in inland waters are necessary to bend the curve of biodiversity loss and meet the goals of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We hope that the Vital Sites webinar series can foster dialogue and discussion on technical needs and practical solutions toward strengthening inland water conservation. I would like to especially thank the organizers and all the panelists for organizing this really exciting webinar, and I wish you all the very best for a productive dialogue. Thank you.
We're now going to move into the portion of our program where we'll share a bit about the IUCN WCPA technical report and its key messages. We'll be hearing first from Michelle Team and then from Tara Moberg. Michelle is Vice President and Deputy Lead for WWF US's freshwater team. Over the course of her career, Michelle has focused on freshwater biodiversity conservation, protected and conserved areas for freshwater ecosystems, river conservation and connectivity, river-related infrastructure, dams and planning, as well as evaluation of basin health. Tara is the Nature Conservancy's Global Durable Freshwater Protection Advisor. She was instrumental in leading a coalition of NGOs in advance of and during COP15, supporting the inclusion of inland waters in the 30 by 30 target. She's also the lead author of the WCPA report that she and Michelle are going to be sharing from today. Michelle, please go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you, Robin. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It is great to be here with so many of you. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes very quickly walking you through the first part of the report that Robin and Madhu have introduced. Next slide, please. So we know that freshwater ecosystems cover a really tiny proportion of the Earth's surface. Around 1 to 2% is covered by freshwater ecosystems. And yet, that really small part of the planet hosts a dazzling diversity of life. And that includes about 12% of described or known species, 1/3 of all vertebrate species, and believe it or not, about half of all fish species. The oceans are vast, but over half of fish species are actually found in fresh waters. And new species are being described every year. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we are also in the midst of biodiversity crisis. And we see on average that vertebrate populations have declined by about 73% globally, those that are monitored. And that is being driven, unfortunately, by life in fresh waters, which this monitored species populations have declined on average by 85% since 1970. So if we are going to reverse the decline of biodiversity overall, we must be thinking about the life within freshwaters and what they need to survive and thrive. Next slide, please. One of those actions we know is creating and managing protected and conserved areas for inland waters. The good news is that the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity now explicitly includes a target of 30% of protection or coverage for inland waters. And so Tara and I today are going to give you this very whirlwind tour of the contents of the report that we've mentioned, beginning with that question of what, but going beyond that to talk about the where, the how, and while ensuring what important aspects are included. Next slide, please. I'd like to ask you now each to take a moment and just think about what percent of inland waters you believe are covered currently by protected and conserved areas. Just hold that in your mind, that number in your mind for a minute. Next slide, please. So the report presents an updated method and baseline results that answers that question, and those results can be tracked over time. What we found was that on average, about 16% of inland waters are covered by the protected and conserved areas currently. However, there's a huge amount of variation in that percentage across regions, across different ecosystem types. And this graph shows the results for rivers. And so even among river ecosystem types, you can see that the smallest types of rivers, they're already exceeding that 30% global target. However, very large rivers, only less than 5% coverage. So the bottom line is, in order to fully represent all different types of freshwater ecosystems, we really need to be making a lot of progress to get to that 30% target. Next slide, please. So I've made the case that there's a real need for increased focus on inland waters, protected and conserved areas. But what does that mean in practice? What is it that's unique about inland waters that we need to be considering? Some would say that terrestrial protected and conserved areas can and do fully cover the needs of freshwater systems. That's true to a certain extent, but next slide, please. We know that the integrity of inland waters really relies on 5 distinct components of river health. And the design, designation, and management of protected and conserved areas that are intended to protect inland waters really need to consider all of those components. Next slide, please. Also unique to inland waters is the importance of the basin context. Down in the left-hand graphic here, you see some inland water focal areas. These may be those areas of importance where there's lots of endemic freshwater species or very unique habitat types that are rare. If we're only focused on those and we're not considering what's happening in the critical management zones or in the upstream and downstream catchment management zones, we're likely not going to be able to conserve those focal areas and the life within them. Next slide, please. So in the report, we present 4 key questions that can help to assess whether protected and conserved areas can help to or can be the appropriate intervention for any particular issue that you're dealing with. So the first question is, what are the inland water values or objectives that you are trying to achieve, and who are the people that are involved and have vested interest in that objective? Second is, what are the key ecological attributes that are critical to meeting those objectives? And what kind of threats or pressures are originating outside of or within the area that you're looking at protecting? Third, can the protected and conserved area design, designation, or management be used to reduce those threats? And if so, how? And finally, are there opportunities to work with stakeholders outside of the protected area to also reduce those threats? Next slide, please. So taking those 4 questions and applying them to a hypothetical example. The first around objectives, we're trying to set up a protected or conserved area that's going to protect a hippo population. We know that hippos need 1.5 to 2 meters of water in the river depths, and that there's a threat to the river depths from upstream water withdrawals. So if we're going to use a protected and conserved area approach to help conserve that population of hippos, we're going to need to ensure that the protected or conserved area includes a water reserve or environmental flows that keep the river depth at the level that hippos need. And we can also look to engaging upstream water users to see if there's alternative options for where they source their water, or if they could use different crops, or perhaps they can withdraw water at a time of year when it's not so sensitive for hippo populations, like during their breeding season. Next slide, please. The report also has a very large focus on human rights, equity, and inclusion. We make the case that communities need to be at the center of all of the discussions around freshwater protected and conserved areas. And we know that access to freshwater is a basic human right, but that water rights vary tremendously across regions, across countries, even within a single country. And here we're talking not just about established legal water rights for economic purposes or for consumption, but also community rights under indigenous or traditional law. These often include cultural, religious, subsistence dimensions, and these need to be given precedence. Next slide, please. So I'm going to end with an example from a community fluvial reserve that's been set up in Ecuador. In this area, the indigenous communities and the Nature Conservancy became interested in scoping a conservation area because the region was under tremendous threat from mining, deforestation, and pollution. And so upon the request of the indigenous communities, a process was kicked off for using the free, prior, and informed consent approach with 80 communities in the region. There were multiple channels of communication during the process that were set up that took place over a year. And this was including simultaneous translation in native languages, lots of community meetings, workshops, ensuring that the right folks were at the table at the right time to make the decisions and to be fully have their voices heard. At the end of the day, 100% or all 80 communities consented to declare this fluvial system as a community-led conservation area. And it covers over 1,800 kilometers of river and 26,000 hectares of wetland. And with that, I'm going to pass the floor over to Tara, who will lead us through the second half of the report.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to everyone who is joining us from around the world this evening, your morning. It is so inspiring to be here with you all, and we appreciate you taking the time to both sit with us, learn a little bit about what we've learned through the process of developing this report, and also share what you're learning from practice around the world. So Michelle gave a really strong overview of the first 3 chapters of the report, which, to recap, include a global status of freshwater protection or inland water protection from protected and conserved areas. It also includes the unique considerations for considering freshwater ecosystems and inland water ecosystems in the use of protected and conserved areas as a tool for conservation. And she rounded it out, underscoring the critical need to start with human rights, equity, and inclusion when considering any protections related to water resources. So I'll move to the latter half of the report, chapters 4, 5, and 6, that focus on designing, designating, managing, and financing protected and conserved areas as a tool to conserve inland water ecosystems and biodiversity. Next, please. Starting with chapter 4, and I should mention, as we move through each chapter, we'll drop a link in a chat that will bring you directly to the first page in that chapter, and just invite you to scroll along with us. We know you're very busy, and it's really difficult these days to download a PDF, never mind read it. So really invite you to multitask and scan what tools might work for you and what tools may be less useful as I share the high-level principles that are included in the 3 chapters. Starting with the 7 principles for integrating inland waters into a protected area network for conservation planning, I want to call out the approach, which was really not creating new frameworks, but using the science that is available today and experiences to date to integrate inland waters into existing conservation planning tools, and including those tools that are used conventionally for terrestrial and marine protected area conservation and management. Inland waters are nature's great integrators, and the photo captures this beautifully, reminding us that the connection of marine, terrestrial, and freshwater ecosystems in our conservation planning can only strengthen our protected and conserved area networks. Just sharing a couple of the principles so you get a feel for the range. First, one of the principles starting off is to really understand the legal and policy framework for protected and conserved areas in the region that you're working, a country, a region. And understanding the gaps is often the policies to protect water resources and the policies for protected and conserved areas don't include specific connections to freshwater protections. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. A second area is around conservation planning and really using, as Michelle shared, a watershed unit when you're approaching systematic spatial planning. And the report in table 4.2 includes data sets that can help you do that in your geography of focus. Next, please. So moving from the spatial planning scale, the landscape, seascape scale, down to a site-specific scale, once you've identified the places or areas that may be important to conserve and the objectives you're trying to meet in those places, it's important to ensure that the areas are defined with sufficient size and configuration to meet those objectives, recognizing that that will vary whether it's a complex of vernal pools or a river segment or a lake. It's also important to include the banks, the bed, and the surface and groundwater body in the defined areas, recognizing that often the geographic boundaries define landmass, but don't describe the freshwater features within them, which can lead to ambiguity in implementation. Lastly, calling back to the example of the fluvial reserve, in some cases, there will be the opportunity to conserve an entire catchment upstream or inclusive of the area of interest. Where that isn't possible, or in some cases may not be necessary, it's important at a minimum to consider including the riparian and floodplain buffers for the freshwater inland water ecosystem that you're trying to protect. And we see from the example on the left, a protected area. The river is the boundary of this protected area on the right. And you see the difference in land use for a river that's included fully within the protected area and the river that serves as the boundary. Next, please. Recognizing that the geographically defined areas are static, and as Michelle shared, inland water ecosystems are dynamic. By nature, they're fluid. We need something to complement the geographic boundaries when we're approaching protection. One way to do that is the development of environmental standards that are integrated into the designation mechanism for the protection. That can happen through a range of approaches, whether it's narrative, which is a higher level broad approach. Two examples here. One is specific to inland water ecosystems, and you see in the definition includes the provision of environmental flows, aquatic connectivity, and water quality with the goal of supporting aquatic life and ecosystem services. The second example is more general, but it includes language that considers inland water ecosystems by defining the goals in terms of habitat maintenance and the maintenance of ecological processes. It is inclusive of inland water ecosystems, as opposed to some more conventional language that may focus on land protection and vegetation protection. It includes processes and habitat. Moving to a more site-specific approach and recalling the hypothetical example that Michelle introduced, environmental flows can be, a site-specific standard can be developed as well. So the example that Michelle shared highlighted the need for hippo populations to have a specific depth. That depth can be translated to a site-specific environmental flow standard. Next, please. Building from the national scale or regional scale planning, once there's an understanding of what you're interested in conserving and where, Chapter 5 introduces an array of designation and governance mechanisms that can be tailored to the site-specific context of your area of focus. The report, thanks to the generous contributions of many people on this phone, including our speakers today, and governments, indigenous communities, and civil society organizations. It includes more than 40 case studies, which cover conservation areas, including all 6 IUCN protected area types, other effective area-based conservation measures, or OECMs, and indigenous protected areas and territories, including ICCAs and IPAs. It also touches on cases that use international designations like biosphere reserves, Ramsar sites, and World Heritage sites. Next, please. We also want to highlight some of the mechanisms that are more novel or emerging, tailored to inland water ecosystem needs. One includes the sacred and cultural areas, or rights and rights of nature designations. There's a recent example in Croatia where on the Krupa River, where a cultural heritage designation was used for the first time on an inland water ecosystem. The Krupa River itself was included in the designation, as well as the area up to the ridge tops to preserve the cultural values of that river in perpetuity. Moving to riverine focused protections, these are mechanisms that are really focused on that connectivity and the flow of the ecosystems, recognizing that really defines our riverine health. And there are several examples included in the report. I'll call out one in particular from the U.S. Wild and Scenic Rivers Act and the national system of wild and scenic rivers that it established. These designations include protections specifically for flow and connectivity, as well as a defined floodplain that is included within the area that's designated, and that the width of that floodplain protection is dependent on the type of designation that's included, whether it's a wild river, a scenic river, or a recreational river. We'll also hear about some other river protections a little bit later today, including a really innovative one from Argentina, which I'm so excited about. Moving on to nature-based solutions for water and climate, recognizing nature-based solutions aren't new, and we're even celebrating the 25-year anniversary of FONAG, or the Quito Water Fund, just recently. But what is new and emerging is really coupling nature-based solutions with biodiversity conservation in an intentional way. This example from Vermont is to call out the passing of the Flood Safety Act there, which conserved 5,500 miles of river corridor area in order to improve flood safety, as well as the functioning of important floodplain habitats for biodiversity. Next, please. Another novel approach has been geographically defined environmental flow protections. So just again, in the last couple of years, a designation in Chile articulated a water flow reserve for 2 rivers, the Puelo and the Futaleufú rivers, that had been historically threatened by the proposal of hydropower and dam development in the basins. The water flow reserves define an environmental allocation of water for the river and an amount of water to conserve ecosystem health, as well as support the thriving ecotourism on both of those rivers. Moving to another example, community fish reserves. There are cases in the report that highlight how these tools have been demonstrated in sites throughout the world to support community fisheries, as well as deliver on biodiversity conservation using specific management approaches and management plans. And we heard about an example of that earlier today. Lastly, just wanted to touch on groundwater supported ecosystem protections, recognizing that unique tools will be needed when you're considering the interface between groundwater and surface water and habitats or species that may depend on those unique ecosystems. Next, please. Finally, moving into chapter 6, kind of building from our designations and transitioning into the management of these spaces that have been designated. So this section focuses on management plans themselves, monitoring, budgeting, and sustainable finance. It includes several tools, including an outline of a conventional or typical management plan for a protected and conserved area, and crosswalking the types of considerations that might be included when developing that management plan to integrate the needs of inland waters. This could include, again, riparian buffers and boundary markers that include those buffers. It also includes establishing indicators for measuring the effectiveness of the management plan that consider freshwater conservation or inland water conservation objectives. As you can see in the image to the right, that is a picture of a couple of colleagues in Gabon who are electrofishing, doing a survey within a protected and conserved area to assess the population, fish health population. Moving into the consideration of different interventions, also included in this section of chapter 6 is a table that includes activities, as Michelle shared, in the different zones of a watershed management, different zones of a watershed, starting with the protected areas or the focal areas, the things that you can invest in directly within your geographic boundaries, as well as the activities you may want to account for that are outside of the boundaries in critical management zones or the broader catchment, recognizing that that may not be within the control of your jurisdiction or your agency or institution, but by participating in the policy processes or planning processes at those scales, you may be able to influence the conditions of connectivity, water quality, environmental flows that will be absolutely critical to the conservation objectives of your area. Next, please. And I'll round out, after you have your management plan and the activities that are prioritized, just the importance of budgeting and financing. Not to state the obvious, but just to underscore that while the budgeting categories and the financing tools for terrestrial and marine protected areas are similar, there are some considerations that you may want to take into account in order to be able to manage for inland water ecosystem health, as well as monitor the effectiveness of your interventions. On the budgeting side of things, considering personnel that have specific expertise to inland water systems, ichthyologists, fisheries biologists, also contractors that specialize in it, maybe to complement the existing staff, the existing staff on hand, as well as capital expenditures like boats or water quality monitoring equipment, gauging stations, again, things that can help you to track the effectiveness of the interventions on the site to ensure that you're meeting your conservation objectives for inland waters in your area. Also, just touch on sustainable financing tools and to share, again, that these tools have been demonstrated to deliver inland waters ecosystem conservation outcomes, as well as marine and terrestrial, and there are several examples in the report. I'll just call out a recent example. I guess it's about to celebrate its 1-year anniversary in just a couple of weeks. This is a partnership. This example is in Mongolia and a project of a partnership called Enduring Earth. The project itself is called a Project Finance for Permanence, and it uses the combination of agreement between the government and an NGO, in this case, the Nature Conservancy, and a Conservation Trust Fund tool to create a long-term plan for conservation in the country. In this case, the long-term agreement included 3 goals, which were to expand the protected and conserved area network to achieve a 30% conservation. It also includes improved effective management of the existing protected area network, as well as improved practices and supporting communities and grazing practices in areas around the protected, in areas around the national parks and in important corridors between them. And just noting, I saw one of our colleagues on the call from Mongolia, so thank you for your contributions to this project. With that, I'll just thank you again for your attention and really look forward to our conversation today and welcome you to reach out anytime.
Thank you so much to Tara and Michelle for setting the stage for those great presentations. I'm not seeing any questions currently in the Q&A, so we will go ahead and move into the next portion of our program. You are welcome to put questions for Michelle or Tara into the Q&A at any point in time, and we will have the opportunity to revisit them, or at least a subset of questions after we hear from our next two speakers. So now we're going to move into the part of our program where we'll hear about real-world case studies. And I'm so excited to hear about both of these case studies and to hear from our presenters. So our first speaker is Lucio Ricardo Milizia. He's going to be speaking about the San Francisco River in Argentina. Lucio wears many hats. He is the coordinator of the Protected Productive Landscapes program at Proyungas Foundation in Argentina. He's also an adjunct professor and community ecology chair with the Faculty of Agricultural Sciences in Argentina's National University of Jujuy. I'm sure I mispronounced that. And he is a filmmaker and a founding partner of IUCN in Argentina. Welcome, Lucio. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Robin, for the presentation and for the invitation tonight. There is a previous slide, Kate, if you can go, and that's let's check. That's a no. Sorry, go back to the first one. I'm sorry. The previous ones. And thanks everybody for being here. I hope I have 5 minutes. The previous one. Okay, thank you. Thank you everybody for being here, and I hope to share some of our work in Argentina and also to be able to provide you with some examples and hopefully some ideas for your own work. So this project is called San Francisco, is the name of the river, Fluvial Protected Landscape. I want to be clear, this is not yet a protected area. It's a project that we are developing to finally and hopefully achieve a protected area. We started this project 3 years ago, and I will describe a little bit where we are now. So please, the next one. I hope that picture gives you an idea of the river and the system where we are. It's the whole San Francisco River is 250 kilometers long, but we are working in a portion of that river that is 130 kilometers long and 23,000 hectares. That includes the river and the floodplain and forest on both sides. The development of this project started with land use planning of native forest at the scale of Jujuy province. Jujuy is a province in northwestern Argentina, and Argentina is located in the southern portion of South America. So it goes through a plain that is very rich in agriculture. Jujuy is surrounded by mountains. We are in the Andes. The river flows at 700 meters above the sea level, but the whole watershed is located in the mountains. So the plain where the river is located is very rich in terms of agriculture, in terms of soil quality, and mainly there is sugarcane, soybean, citric plantations that have been there for more than 100 years. Those sugarcane fields that you see there have been there for a century now. The next, please. So basically, this fluvial protected landscape idea it includes the river and the floodplains on both sides, and is conceived as a protected area where the government and the private landowners will join forces to try to make the reserve a reality. So far, we have been working with the Ministry of the Environment and at the Jujuy province to get a declaration of environmental interest that can be read as from two sides, just a declaration and doesn't mean much. And on the other side, this declaration took a couple of years of effort through meetings with different stakeholders that agreed to push forward the idea. And I will talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. The next, please. Perhaps the most important thing about this river is that it's the main river of the province, and it connects all other rivers in the region. It's like I don't know, I'm not sure how to say in English, but the main column of a body that will receive all other smaller rivers and streams into this main river. And it's a central part of a law that provides the land use planning of all native forest in the province. So the whole design of this land use planning took into consideration this main river, the San Francisco River. So it's in that sense, it's central as a corridor and as a conservation strategy for the whole region. The next, please. The threats to river are basically water contamination through industrial and urban wastes. The industry that used to be the main threat has been working for a couple of decades now to better their practices and to avoid throwing waste into the river. That has been a real problem in the last decades, but in the last few years, I would say 5 to 10 years, that perspective is really changing with a lot of pressure from the environmental agency and from the media and the social medias that now communicate very fast and are helping to keep an eye on what's going on in terms of industrial wastes. A little behind these urban wastes that requires public investment and there is a better scenario now, but still many things have to be done to really secure the water quality. Then another threat is water consumption, basically to drink water for the urban areas around. Like 500,000 people lives around this river. So it's not enormous, but there are several cities of about 100,000 people around these rivers, around this particular river, I'm sorry. And also agriculture consumption especially for sugar cane has been a threat, changing the volume of the water flowing. We still don't have a regulation of how much water you are supposed to leave in the river, so that's a very difficult point, but has to be addressed and regulated. I'm also optimistic with that now. The situation is a little better than a couple of decades ago when the river could literally dry because of water consumption. Now that's better regulated, but we still need a lot of biological information and industrial and political willing to achieve an ideal situation, but things are going better. And then overfishing, basically for communities around the river and as a main sport. But even if the fishing in this river is prohibited, the capacity of the state to put that in place is not great. So there is a lot of fishing. We actually don't think we need to banish the fishing, but just to regulate. And finally, the deforestation on the margins, that has been controlled through this land use planning law that we passed 15 years ago. And so now is very well regulated, but the consequences of deforestation before the law was passed are still there. And my last slide, please. Thinking on stakeholder engagement, I think there are a couple of things that I want to highlight. First, this proposed protected area should and will hopefully be a co-management situation between the government authorities and private owners with riverfront. I think that's perhaps a new way to see the protection of this river. I didn't mention, but this eventually will be the first protected river in Argentina that is specifically dedicated to river. We have protected areas that include rivers, but we don't have rivers protected as the main focus of that protected strategy. And a few minutes ago, I mentioned about meetings that we organized for a couple of years with municipalities. Argentina at the province. Argentina is divided in provinces, and then provinces are divided in municipalities. So we went through a couple of meetings with different municipalities that share the riverfront of the San Francisco River, and to talk with them, to provide them with information about the situation of the river, their view of the river, and trying to engage them. There are 7 municipalities involved, and 3 of them have been very involved. The others are still looking at this as something little weird, and I'm not sure how to proceed and the consequences of getting involved, but that's part of the challenges of the play. We have been also working a lot with indigenous communities along the river, are the Guarani communities. They are not specially related with the river, but they are the ones, the communities that are closer to the river, and they have been very supportive with the idea. They have a way to look at how the world works that is very nature prone. So the idea was for them was interested and supportive of the idea. And also we have been working with tourism enterprises that are looking at the river as a important place to develop tourist activities. It's incredible because it's the main river of the province, but very few people interact with the river, and the tourism agencies many times don't actually they don't know the river. They pass the river at some bridge sometime, but they don't really were aware of the river and the possibilities. So we have been working with all these stakeholders for the design and eventually designation of the protected area. Thank you. I hope I was more or less in time.
Thank you so much, Lucio, for that contribution. Really exciting to think about that river protection initiative. Our next and final speaker is going to be Jamie Woods, and he'll be speaking about the Guyanni wetlands in Australia. Jamie is a Ngari Ngari Tribal Council delegate, chair of Mawumbul Co-Management, and member of the Hay Local Aboriginal Land Council Board. Jamie has extensive experience in water management, including the use of environmental water on Guyanni and Tugimbi. Jamie, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Firstly, Jamie Woods. I'd also like to acknowledge and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging all over the world, and also acknowledge all the people that are on the webinar with the same passion and drive that we have for our wetlands, lakes, rivers, and our country. I'm Jamie Woods, Chair of No Tribal Council and Guyanni Nimikara Land Manager. Also a very passionate person when it comes to freshwater management. It's probably our cup of tea alongside our main goal, which is our culture and heritage. Next slide. So who is No Tribal Council? We were established in November 2000 by a group of First Nations people with a shared vision for community and country. Our main goal was working on cultural and heritage and protection in the region alongside Hay Local Aboriginal Land Council. In 2000, obviously, the purchase of 3 properties, which were Tugimbi, Glenhope and Lorenzo, where one was declared an Indigenous protected area in 2003. Then come along 2018, where we were successful in winning the management of this beautiful place that I get to call home again, is Guyanni. And alongside the Weiss Foundation and ILSC helped us make the purchase and ownership a reality in 2019, December 2019. Next slide. The consortium journey. I'd like to talk about our consortium partners any chance I get. They've played a very big role in this Guyanni project, and the Nature Conservancy led the bid on paper, informed by NNTC's vision for country with expert advice from the consortium team. NNTC are the drivers with a focus on furthering developing leadership within the organisation. It was always known that the land would be ours again to manage. And we have some beautiful consortium partners. We did go through a process where we had a few try and join, but not with the same shared vision and outcomes that the 4 of us that sit here today and help manage, and the expertise that are guided by these other organisations such as the Nature Conservancy, the University of New South Wales, the Centre for Ecosystem Science, the Murray-Darling Wetlands Working Group, and of course ourselves, Norinara Tribal Council. The journey began for us at Goyni in 2018, the 1st of July, where we got the keys to the gate, so to speak. It was a very emotional time for community and the people involved in the project. It had been a rather large journey since 2012, when the government first purchased the land off 11 different property owners back in 2012 through a water saving project between the federal and state New South Wales governments. We have come a long way as a consortium. We've produced some beautiful big outcomes. Over 500,000 water birds alone just in 2022. We've delivered, Goyni delivers the next generation to the world through the water birds, through fish. We've got some beautiful big lakes, actually 3 big lakes that we've just finished a fish tracking project out of one of them to reconnect the fish back into the main river, which is the Murrumbidgee. So, and for us, Goyni's become a bit of an endangered threatened species hub, where we've seen all these threatened species and endangered species return through the plains wanderers, the superb parrots, the bitters. They've all started to return, which is so exciting for our organisation and our, I guess, the people that are on this journey with us. It hits home that we are doing something right and melts the heart a little bit. Goyni plays a major role in delivering much better water quality to the river downstream. Obviously, it's a major, we call it the kidney country ourselves. So the water comes off obviously into the floodplain and purifies and returns back to the river system down below us, west of us, in a much better state than what I come on. So that's the main goal, was getting out to get our kidney country back working again in the best possible way it could, and play a major, what could I say, an ecosystem service to our neighbouring nations and our neighbouring Aboriginal people below us. So that was one of the main goals when we took on Goyni. We're currently probably the biggest environmental water managers and users in the Murray-Darling Basin, which is a major, what can I say? It was a big opportunity in itself to take on that role and deliver outcomes with the amount of water. I think we've roughly delivered over 600,000 megalitres of water across the floodplain since 2018, which is a fair whack of environmental water. And without water and without producing good water, we can't deliver outcomes. So further downstream for our neighbouring nations. So we're very grateful that we do get the opportunity to use the environmental water on Goyni. We're also very blessed to, next slide. I will go to the next slide. Obviously, I'll go through our vision, which is, I spoke about Toogambi, which is the IPA as well. But nature at Toogambi and Goyni thrives, and the people of these places, its lands and waters, in return, Goyni heals its people so they can enjoy culturally, socially, and economically sustainable and fulfilling lives. And that did come out of our Goyni Healthy Country Plan that we did along in 2018, 2019 with community and the Nature Conservancy. Next slide. Obviously, we do have a really big list of future opportunities that we'd like to see, not only on Goyni but across the nation, and obviously First Nation-led water delivery and ownership of land and water. We're lucky enough to be one of them nations that have that opportunity, but we'd love to see more of that. And economic development, obviously, through water. The better research and data development space, we've actually we're building a Goyni data hub. We've received a couple of $1 million through the ARDC to build a Goyni data hub, which was exciting for us because There's plenty of data out there, and people have been monitoring and researching Goini for a very long time. And I guess for us, we're building a one-stop shop for all of us, so we can capture the time. For us, the biggest thing is we want to capture the time of change. We want to capture the change that we produce through flora and fauna, and I guess for us that's the exciting part as well, because we'll be able to have it in one spot where people can see, watch what we're doing, watch what's being delivered to through the next generation. Next slide. Yes, so this was a very big outcome for Goini. The New South Wales BCT Conservation Agreement, which we signed last year, over 56,000 hectares of Goini is 88,000 hectares, but we signed an agreement in perpetuity on 56,000 hectares of Goini, which was an exciting part. It shored up Goini's future, so to speak, and obviously shored up the community's future through land management on Goini through that agreement. We fought pretty hard for the use of grazing as a tool, a conservation tool, and economic land use. The ability to continue cultural practice within the area, including fire, which was a very, very big win for us. We're obviously got some fencing through some of the main environmental assets that we want to protect, and we're currently putting in some fencing over the next 3 years. It may take about 5 years. We had a flood come along that held us up a little bit with some of the fencing. It was the largest agreement signed to date from the New South Wales Biodiversity Conservation Trust. So it was a very big outcome for our consortium and our organisation, and that's not the most important thing, but it was a very big outcome for this country, this place that we call home, Goini. Next slide. Oh yes, so thank you. And if anyone ever wanted to reach out and hear more about our story, I could talk for days, but I won't. And I'm sure Peter would be putting something in the chat for everyone a link in the chat for everyone to press on. But again, thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully I'll see you around the world one day so we can talk about Goini. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I don't know if you're extending invitations to come and visit, but I will happily join you there. And I now have a new term I'm going to use. I think it was kidney country. Is that what you said? I love that. Definitely be using that. So we are now at the end of our formal program, and we have the remainder of our time for questions and answers. As you'll see, or you may have seen, we've had some questions that have been put into the Q&A section, and they've been answered already in writing. I would encourage you, our attendees, to keep putting questions in, and we'll do our best to get as many of them asked as we can, understanding that ultimately we might run out of time, but we will do our very best here. So I would like to just ask both Jamie and Lucio, these were fantastic presentations that you gave, and I'd like to ask you maybe what is the thing that you are most proud of, the success that you would really want to highlight in terms of each of the projects that you've shared with us? If there was one thing that you really felt demonstrated the success of the project so far, what would that be? And you're welcome to just go off mute and answer. Maybe Lucio first.
Okay. Well, first, congratulations, Jamie, on your work. It was a little hard for me to follow your English, but I made my best. I would say that perhaps the most, I don't want to use the word successful yet, but I would say that the most interesting and challenging thing is to put together a lot of different wishes and ways to see how the world works. In general, this approach that we have is very interested to work with different, I would say, kind of people, in the sense of landowners, big industries, as the sugarcane industry in this part of the region is very big. One of the neighbors of this watershed provides the 40% of the paper of the country and 60% of the sugar of the country. So we are talking about big companies, and then indigenous communities and municipalities and other people. So I think this approach where we are trying to put together two different kinds of ways to see the world. I mean, in one sense, the Ministry of the Environment and biologists and a lot of people, let's say, closer to us. And I think the most interesting thing is to add other stakeholders that have a different vision, and to really to sit around the table together and share interests and try to come up with a river that is protected but still is used by people fishing on the weekends, and an industry taking water, and we drinking water from this river. So I think that way to approach the issue, the task is, it might be different from other places where we come with an idea of a protected area. We talk with people around, but at the end we just somehow I don't want to say impose, but it's difficult to find another word, but we finish doing what we want to do. And we are trying to provide a different approach that, if successful, it might be useful to replicate along other rivers in Argentina that are needing protection too.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
I've probably got two. Obviously our management style, we use look, listen and feel, obviously, for our management, and that's the style we've always used as an organization. And I guess someone did ask me one day, how do you know when your country's healthy? Obviously I told him to shut his eyes while he had a video camera on me and a speaker, and I said, shut your eyes, and it was right on dark, and I said, shut your eyes and just listen. And I said, what can you hear? And he just started naming everything: birds, frogs, fish jumping in the water beside us. And I said, that's how you can tell your country's healthy, is when it's talking back to you. And I said, that's how we read it. So for me, that was, if I can shut my eyes at night time and hear everything, the bats, the birds, the fish jumping and everything calling, then our country, we're doing something right. If we hear nothing, we're doing something wrong. And obviously the other one that melts the heart is when the aunties come out and say, I haven't seen water like that since I was 9-10-year-old. So it melts the heart. That's the feedback you want, trust me, because that's when you know you're doing something right. And when they say the yabbies, they've never seen yabbies this big since they were young kids. Yeah, everything's returning.
I think you may have to tell some of us what a yabby is.
The freshwater sort of crayfish that, obviously you get freshwater crays in the river, but these are massive big yabbies that dig deep in the winter into the mud and obviously come when the water comes. But we've seen turn of that like I'm talking thousands, hundreds of thousands of tons of yabbies in the water now, in the crystal clear water. And that's what the owner said. But I remember being able to dive for them and see them at the bottom of the logs. And he goes, I haven't seen that since I was a kid. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And you've given me something else here. Use, look, listen, and feel. I was going to ask a question about how do you define success, but I think you just answered that question. Use, look, listen, and feel. But maybe I will ask you, Lucio, how would you define success for your project? What does success look like?
I have two answers. A simple one would be success will mean a group of people kayaking in the river, stopping on some place on the side of the river, in a place that is clean, that you can use and you will leave it clean too, and that you will return to the city and talk to your family and friends about this amazing adventure and share that love for the river. That would be one answer. Another will be to have the protected area running with a lot of meetings and discussions and different points of view and agreements and disagreements, but all seated around the idea of protecting this place and pushing it forward. Mm-hmm. The second one is a little more academic. The first one is more of, I don't know, from someone that likes to go outside and enjoy nature.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just note, I think many of you know that we ran this same webinar, but with different case studies, our morning, your evening, I believe, or the middle of the night for some of you. And we heard some very similar themes in those case studies about the importance of working with the different stakeholders, the different interests, of course, the local communities, to really listen and to accommodate the different values that they have. Also, I'm really curious about a couple of things that you both mentioned. One is about sort of how do you replicate what you're doing in other places? How do you share or influence beyond your specific project to inspire others to do something similar, to take that model elsewhere? That's one. I'll start there with that, because I'm really curious as we think about how we can grow our freshwater protections around the world, and any lessons or advice that you might have in terms of inspiring others to do similar things.
I've got a couple. Obviously, finding the right partners. You can't do this alone. It's I'd love to see another 20, 30, 40, 50 Guyanis across Australia. We'd love to see this model rolled out that we've been blessed to come up with our consortium partners, and I'd love to see more of them across the nation. And obviously, where we do share the model, we were blessed to do a Guyani lessons learned with the federal government over 12, 18 months ago. So where we went to Canberra and sat down, and these are the do's and don'ts of what we learned doing this process. And obviously, hopefully the federal government takes it and uses this model in other places. But probably the second one is finding people, like I said, finding people with the right values, the same outcome that you're chasing. And we were blessed to do that, but also looking for partners that don't want to just invest in the project, but they want to walk beside you and not watch from afar. They're the partners you need. Yeah.
In my case, how to replicate these projects, these ideas. Perhaps the most important thing will be to strengthen or make stronger the relationship between civil society and government. At least in our country, the whole protected system is government driven. And we came to 15% of the country protected. And we need to, in the next few years, we are supposed to move that to 30% to duplicate that amount. And I don't think the government can do that alone. So I think civil society can play a big role there. But I think we need a civil society that looks at other parts of the society, not from a superior point of view, but at the same level, and because we like to see others as threats. And that's a word that we love in biology and in the conservationist arena. And I think we need to forget that word for a while and think as eventual partners with our interest. And that's perhaps the way we look at this idea that we are developing. If we can replicate that way of seeing others, we might have a chance to get a little closer to 30%. I don't know.
Jamie, did you want to add something there?
No, I was just admiring. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah. We do use the word threat a lot for a lot of things.
We do. And I'm guilty for having asked you both to talk about the threats. So, but I really appreciate that contribution. And maybe just we might have time for one or two more questions. And I think this relates to the conversation here. So I've heard you talk about just now the importance of meeting people, putting everyone on the same level, not being, adversarial or confrontational. We also heard about, for instance, in the San Francisco, but I know also in Guayini, it's not about excluding people from the system, right? It's about encouraging uses that are compatible with the system's health. And I think that's something that maybe distinguishes in some way freshwater conservation, ecosystem conservation and protection. Not that it should, land protection, terrestrial, marine protection probably should look the same, but in freshwater systems, we can't exclude people and we don't want to exclude people, right? And so I'm curious because I know in my job, when I use the word protection, it immediately for many people evokes this idea of exclusion, right? And I'm wondering for each of your cases, how you address that potentially, how do you communicate about the project? And this is sort of a two-part question here. Thinking about, again, when we think about protection, it's typical, right, that people who often work in areas of protection, they're not thinking about water. They're not thinking about water flows and the importance of that, even though we know water flows are equally important for so-called terrestrial systems as for freshwater systems. We need to be thinking about them all the time. And so I'm wondering again how you communicate about the importance of water flows within these systems and whether you're seeing some movement among your audiences in understanding the different ways that we need to be thinking about freshwater conservation, if you will. So that was a very long question, many parts. Pick whatever part you would like to answer, but I'm just curious about how you might be changing paradigms, I guess I would say, around when we use the word protection and what that means for freshwater systems.
I don't believe you can protect these ecosystems without people, so they go hand in hand. So obviously my father and when we first took on ground, he had a vision of at least 50 odd people living back on country and managing this place. And obviously since time immemorial, people lived and sustained themselves on this beautiful big floodplain since time immemorial. So even just have a goal like that, we are getting there. We're lucky enough to, we've got one ranger team now. We're about to advertise for 8 more people. Obviously we connect a lot of our community and the younger generation to this place through the land care network. We do cultural camps. We're trying to produce the next country keepers of the region, that so to speak. We do a lot of that. The gates are always open because I don't believe you can protect these landscapes without people. So I don't believe in shunning them. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yes, I will. I'm trying to recapitulate your question, but I will say 2 things. One on communication, and maybe the other on how we see river systems. It's kind of, I agree with you. It's rivers are, at least in this part of the world, it's like they are vital. They provide us with water and to drink and to irrigate our crops. A century ago, to make the transportation of our goods. But somehow we forgot the importance of the rivers. It's like they are in some place in the backyard where we don't go very often. It's closer to where we put the garbage than to the front yard. And that's kind of strange, at least in this part of Argentina and of the world. It's like we forgot about how beautiful and important are rivers. We think, and now I go to the second part, I think we need to appeal to not only to monitoring and knowing what's going on, but to feelings.
Yeah.
And to bring the river closer again to people. And in that sense, for example, I think tourism is very important. And since I like to do documentaries and movies, another way to do that we are doing is a documentary about the river. It's just one story, but in the documentary, we interview a lady that is a guide, a very renowned lady that guides people through the forest. And she lives 15 kilometers away from the river. She never went to walk on the side of the river, and she doesn't know how to swim, and she never took a kayak to paddle into the river. So we took like 50 or 20 different tourism agencies, and we organized a 2-day tour kayaking into the river, and it was a big success. And the people were like saying, "Oh, it's amazing. This river doesn't belong to this part of the country." It's like, because it's very different from other rivers that we have that are more mountain rivers. This is more a floodplain river. And in the documentary, we try to showcase those examples and to appeal to someone fishing on the side and someone that needs water for the agriculture. But from a I don't know if that would be clear, but from a feelings perspective, let's say, I think we need to get the river closer to the society.
Yeah,
That's
thank you. That is a fantastic way for us to close out this discussion. I at least agree with you, and I'm guessing others do as well. We are at the end. I want to thank especially Jamie and Lucio for your amazing contributions, as well as for the unbelievable work that you are doing yourselves and with partners. Of course, I also want to thank my colleagues, Tara and Michelle and Madhu. We hope that this webinar has achieved its objective of raising your understanding of how protected and conserved areas can support inland water biodiversity and associated social values. We know that many of you will want to know more. We encourage you to explore the technical report that we mentioned earlier. There's a QR code there, and we've also had the link in the chat. So once again, thank you so much. And we hope that everyone on this call is inspired to do good work for inland waters conservation. Thank you so much.